You're listening to the Fan2Fan Podcast, and on this episode, we're talking about our love for indie theaters. That's right, we're talking about art house theaters, independent theaters, the programming that they feature, the movies, their distinct personalities, what makes them unique, what makes them different from the multiplexes that show those first-run movies. We love movies, we love indie theaters, and we talk about it. Here we go. Welcome to the Fan2Fan Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Bernie Gonzalez. With me today, fellow co-host Pete Charbonneau. Pete, we love movies. We love going to movies. We love going to indie movie theaters. And when we're going to talk about indie movie theaters, it just makes sense to bring on some Fan2Fan all-stars, hashtag stranger friends. Allan and Bex, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks for having us again.
Yes, Rebecca is battling back from the flu, but we're happy to be here. We'll show up to play injured for the Fan2Fan Podcast. We love it here. This is going to be the MJ flu game for both of you guys. Yes, we're going to bring our best.
This is why, the Fan2Fan All-Stars are the All-Stars, because even battling the flu, they're going to give it their all.
I do enjoy sweating and panting with you fellas.
If there's a better endorsement out there, I haven't heard it.
That might actually be on our non-existent marketing poster, Pete. For sure. All right. We like movie theaters. We've talked about movie theaters before. Allan and Becca, I think for all the people that I know, you guys probably go to the movie theater the most regularly, and how we just love that communal experience, and figured, well, why not use this as a good excuse? And let's talk about the heroes of the cinematic world, indie movie theaters. The people who run them, the volunteers that help keep them running, and people like us who patronize them. And if you're listening to this, you're probably listening because you're also a movie fan. You're also a film fan. So you've probably been to your fair share of like indie art house type places, theaters. And I say places because they're not always a theater. Sometimes they're in a mini mall. Sometimes it's just an abandoned church or whatever. It doesn't always look like a theater, but it feels like a theater. It smells like a theater, and it just is a magnet for people who want that experience. So why not put a framework together where we can talk about the awesomeness that are art house theaters, indie theaters. And in order to do that, I'm just going to throw out a bunch of P's because I'm a fan of alliteration and acronyms.
The letter P, my favorite letter. Oh, yeah? Why? Because all the great food that begins with the letter P.
P is my favorite letter, because I'm the kids living on my street.
The 6 P's that we can kind of work off of is purpose, proximity, personality, programming, products, and people. And hopefully this all makes sense as we start getting into it. But I figure let's just start off with purpose. And I kind of made the distinction before. Growing up, the big chains, the AMCs, the Regal, the Landmark, they were the ones that would always show the first run movies, the big movies, 2 or 3 showings of Lord of the Rings or Spider-Man or Titanic playing at like noon, 1:15, 2:45, 3:15. So you could probably find the time to go there with your friends to watch those movies versus indie theaters. They usually only had 1, maybe 2 screens. So that's the one movie that they were showing. Or there's also that distinction between like second run movies. I remember seeing movies like Rumble in the Bronx or Chain Reaction in these small theaters where I would only pay $2 or $3 because I wasn't able to see it at the AMC when it first came out. But it's also nice not to pay the $10, $12 to see it at the big theater.
Yeah, very similar experience. There are a lot of indie movie theaters around here. Certain ones have different purposes. Some of them are really focused on those second runs. Some are showing actual indie movies or foreign films, and they're all great for what they offer, and being very different from the usual big places, your AMCs and your Showcase is a big one around here. I don't know how far that reaches, but that's the other big chain in this area.
Yeah, and I think, the purpose of a lot of these places, I've posited this before, is that Friday night, Saturday night, we love nothing better than to check out an old movie. Back to the Future is playing at Salem Cinema.
Hello and welcome to the best independently owned and locally operated theater in the country. We're glad you're here. And now we invite you to sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Let's run out there. It's $7. The floor is going to be
sticky. The seat is going to have springs hanging out of it. The purpose of a lot of them today is to serve the cinephiles.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, there's always going to be, we've talked about this before, there's always going to be some segment of the population that just absolutely loves going to the theater, that experience. As much as, a lot of those, major chains have tried to replicate the living room experience for people to get more people to come back. And we talked about how, like, post-COVID, it just really hasn't picked back up again in the numbers that it once commanded of people actually going to the theater. But I think places like Alamo Drafthouse, well, yes, you're probably paying a little bit more for a ticket and also for the popcorn or the dinner and all that. And then on top of that, you're paying the extra gratuity for the servers. That is by no means a cheap night out. But for people that are seeking that type of experience, one, you're giving back to, people in the service industry. So that's great. Yes, of course, you got to pay an extra gratuity fee, but you're just getting an experience. And with a place like Alamo that really goes all out in the aesthetics, like you walk in there and there's the VHS cassette tables that you can sit at. There's the Italian movie posters. It just really harkens back to something. And I think it just hits a lot of people that are really into movies in a certain place in the feels that just feels great. And whether it's something that is, I would put up there with something that Alamo's doing, or a place that I'll probably talk a little bit more about later, this place in DC that I used to go to, the West End Theater, which unfortunately, sadly, is no more. Like, that was just walking into a basement in a building, very nondescript. The theaters were tiny. The seats weren't the most comfortable. The screen was small, but you got to see films there that you would not see anywhere else. You would not see it at AMC. And from a comfort or an aesthetic experience, night and day from Alamo, but it was still about going to get to see those movies. And I had an experience there that I'll share a little bit later with a movie that I went to go see, Blue Ruin. That was just amazing. And it was just one of those, like, I just stumbled in there one day, stumbled upon this film, and I have a memory that I'll cherish for the rest of my life there. So, yeah, I mean, the purpose is to cater to the crowd, those crazy people like us that love still going to the movie. They love the experience of the house lights dimming. Once you get through all the previews, those opening titles come up, and you're going to settle in for the next hour and a half, 2 hours, and just immerse yourself in a story and just kind of let the outside world drift away, and you're just right there and you're in that world that's being presented to you on the screen.
The people that own the really small 2-screen theaters, right? These have to be people that are like their customers, right? Like they're movie lovers. It's like the people that held on to the end, like by their fingernails, to their video stores.
They're the cinephiles, like you said. They have a love for film and not necessarily what has been made for the masses. Exploitation, horror, foreign films. They're the people that love that. I think that's where we've all probably been a little bit the beneficiary of kind of like living in big metropolitan areas. Like I grew up in Chicago. So there were always at least 6 or 7 indie theaters that were always showing something. And Alan, Bex, you guys like Boston area, like you and Pete, you live just about everywhere. But I think we've all benefited from that. Like, I feel bad for maybe someone who may not have that proximity that will now go into that other Pete. And I think this is a good, you said posit earlier, Alan. I remember that. I'm like, oh man, going back to like science. I'm like, all right, here's my theory. I do think that for most people, you want to see a movie that just came out in theaters, right? The newest MCU movie, whatever it is, you probably just go to the theater that's the closest to you. A first run movie, like a brand new release, versus more of like an indie house. If they're playing Friday the 13th Part 3 and this place is a little bit out of the ways, it's not necessarily close to you, you're still willing to make the drive because that place is now a destination. And yeah, you could throw it up on Paramount Plus and watch one of the Friday the 13th or grab the Blu-ray off your shelf and watch it. But you're not looking for that. And you're also not looking for the franchise big screen experience. You're not looking for that. You're looking for something else. And because of that, we're willing to drive to it. We're willing to go to that destination.
Definitely. We've traveled quite a bit to check out different, small theaters. And because they're showing something that we really want to see and experience, it might be a movie we've watched 100 times, but I've never seen it on the big screen. And that's what I want. Absolutely. You're going to drive for that. But yeah, the newest movie that's playing on every screen nearby, then just pick the closest one.
Because they're all going to have goobers, right? Like it's in that case almost feels like French fries at McDonald's. They're all going to have it. So go to your local McDonald's, you get it. They're all going to have goobers. It's these indie theaters that give you that other thing.
Right. You want something different. You want something old. You will travel for that. Absolutely. That's worth it.
I think the other thing too about the traveling that like Rebecca pointed out, like we went to the Chevalier and saw The Princess Bride a few years ago.
20th Century Fox presents a new film by Rob Reiner, The Princess Bride.
I'll see you again.
Of course you will.
How can I be sure?
This is true love. Think this happens every day?
Hold it. Is this a kissing book?
Wait, just wait. The Princess Bride, a comic tale of true love and high adventure, rated PG.
And, one of the best parts about it was it's like when you go to the Chevalier to see The Princess Bride on a Saturday night, we have a great drunk story about Rebecca from that night that I will tell at a different time. Such a great story, Pete.
A different time, you mean later on in the episode, but please continue.
Just maybe, it's a great one. But you go and everyone is reciting the lines together in unison. Like we're all watching it as like one organic, like mass. Like I noticed the same thing when we saw Valley Girl at Brattle. People were just like laughing together at the same moments. It's like all the stuff that you chuckle at home. It's like you find this new appreciation when you go back and you see it in a small theater on a big screen with a bunch of people that appreciate it.
So you gotta go farther for that.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it counts as an indie theater exactly, but I think the farthest we've gone is, which around here there's a lot of them, is like well over an hour. We went to the Mendon Twin Drive-In. They play a lot of old movies, and we went to see Jurassic Park. And that was really cool, by the way. That is worth driving for that experience, to watch a screen that's like basically set in a clearing in a forest area, and then you get the dinosaurs on it and the huge screen, and
it's an ancient
look
truck.
like they're coming out of the trees.
I feel like drive-ins, I know they certainly count them as independent cinemas. You can argue whether like some of them do like the second run stuff, but a lot of them still do the first run movies as well. But I mean, that's just a whole breed unto itself. Like, to have that heyday that they did in the 60s and 70s, that where my parents took me to see Jaws at way too young an age, and, scarred me for life with sharks. Well, not scarred me. I had deep appreciation and love for sharks. But, even just recently, we were up in Fort Collins, Colorado. They've got a great drive-in theater. The Holiday Twin Drive-In Theater in Fort Collins, we saw the latest Indiana Jones movie up there. And it's just like what you were saying, Bex, like you pull up to this thing, you've got the Colorado, the Rockies in the background, the screen is like, front and center with those kind of just receding in the back. It's like really can't get much more picturesque than that. And like, people bring their pickups and SUVs, and they're either in the back of the pickups with the mattresses, or the SUVs are backed in. They open up the back. What an amazing experience it is.
I think drive-ins are almost like they could be their own episode, but they are part of indie cinema. They're small theaters that are run by people that they check all the same boxes.
And plus they're, under the best circumstances, they're open for 2/3 of a year. Like, unless you're in the South, maybe, where you can be open all year round.
It is so good. Everyone for popcorn.
Do it now. Pop out for a big box of fresh, delicious popcorn. It tastes good, and it's good for you.
Well, Pete, you had mentioned drive-ins in the mountains in the background, and I think this is where the next piece...
No, I just mentioned that. I know. Oh, wait. Yes, I did. Sorry.
Okay, good. Personality. Because I think with a lot of these theaters, they not only inhibit the personality of the location they're in. Like I remember going to the Pickwick Theater just outside of Chicago, and it was like this old school Art Deco theater that maybe held 300 people. that place was gorgeous. They just don't build buildings like that anymore. And that's where I would go to see the Godzilla Marathon G-Fest. You would never think that they're showing Destroy All Monsters at the Pickwick Theater. It would be a place where you would see Treasure of the Sierra Madre, or, black and white movies. But no, it was an amazing spot to see that. But I've also been to indie theaters that have been basically in like a rundown strip mall, and both have been amazing. And I think that's where the personality of the theater and the personality of the person who owns it, Allan and Bex, like you guys were talking about, the cinephiles that have to own these places, they're making compromises. I'm sure they would all love to have like an old school movie house, like in the movie The Majestic with Jim Carrey, that you can restore and have it look glorious with, all the Art Deco stuff and the red velvet carpeting. But if you don't, you just rent the place next to the Boba and the Salon and the strip mall, and you're like, all right, well, I'm just going to have one screen here and let it ride, and we'll sell goobers and see who shows up to watch Friday the 13th Part 3 in 3D and see what happens. So I think personality is a big part of these indie theaters.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think that what you notice about the personality of these places is they feel like places that you want to go and watch smaller movies. Like I don't want to go to independent cinemas and single screens to see the big budget stuff like we talked about before. I want to go there to see a foreign film. I want to go there to see something out of Cannes, something out of the Sundance Film Festival. I don't know what it is, but I really like watching a foreign film going to Kendall Square. And now Kendall is a bit of a chain.
It's part of the Landmark Theaters.
Right, the Landmark Theater chain, but it's like their indie house. They sell these like really ornate pastries and brownies. The personality of the place just feels like I'm not going to go there and like I would to Showcase Cinema and like have 2 vodka sodas while I watch a Marvel movie. Whereas like, Brattle in Cambridge, Brattle Theater, which is one of the oldest theaters in the country, you'll go there and smash back some IPAs, and some gourmet popcorn, sit in the rafters, watch old movies. So the architecture of them is beautiful, the nostalgia.
In Cinema Salem, which is in kind of like a little mall. It's an odd space, and they've got 3 screens, I think. One of the things that they do is above each door, they have a chalkboard sign. And so someone writes the name of the movie and does a little drawing with it. And that's something that's unique to Cinema Salem. And I really love whenever we go there to see how it's written and what kind of font they wrote it out in and what little picture goes with it. And of course, because it's Salem, the inside is painted all black. So sometimes the personality of the theater matches the kind of movies that they have. Brattle is kind of run down a bit and a little dark, and it feels kind of old, and they play old stuff. And I really enjoy that.
Yes.
The Brattle Film Foundation is the nonprofit that programs and operates the Brattle Theater, which has been a single-screen repertory cinema since 1953 in the same location the whole time in Harvard Square, Cambridge, Massachusetts. There really are people who can live in Cambridge their entire lives and never even know the Brattle exists. We're not street-facing. So it does have this feeling of it being a secret space. You walk into it and it's this tiny little lobby, and then you walk up these stairs, and then you walk into this completely other space that's not like any other movie theater because it is a historic space. The architecture is literally from 1890. There's just all these interesting little things about the space because it's so old inside. And we're lucky it's still standing.
It's funny that you mentioned the Brattle. I've got a couple of little trivia bites for a couple of these theaters that I had listed, and the Brattle is one of them. And I think that's one of the great things about our friendship, Allan and Bex, because, I lived in Boston for 14 years. So, the overlap of places, although we weren't friends when I lived there, because it's been many years since I've called Boston home, we've all been to the same places. So Bernie, what you were saying, so many of the major metropolitan areas, New York, LA, Chicago, Boston, what a treat it is to have options to go, whether it's the Brattle, Kendall Square, Coolidge Corner Theater, Somerville Theater. I mean, there's you have so many places to choose from, whereas other places in the country, maybe you've got one, and maybe that comes into the proximity thing that you're talking about, Bernie. if you really want to go see something and you're in a really small town, maybe you've got to drive an hour or something like that and make it more of a day, but people will do that. Again, and that's the power of cinema. But going back to my little tidbit on the Brattle, movies have been shown at the Brattle since 1953, when Bryant Halliday and Cyrus Harvey Jr. kicked things off with a screening of the German film Der Hauptmann von Kopernik, which is translated in English as The Captain from Kopernik. The trivia portion of this is that those two gentlemen later founded Janus Films, which their purpose is to distribute foreign films nationwide. They're also, a distributor of certain types of films that might otherwise not see in your major release theater. So if you ever attended a screening of something and you see that Janus Films logo, it all started with those two chaps from Harvard.
They'll play the drinking game where you throw in a Criterion DVD or Blu-ray and you're waiting for the Janus Films logo to pop up because you'll be drunk, because I think 50% of the Criterion catalog is by Janus Films.
The Parkway Theater is located in Stowe Township, part of McKees Rocks, which is 5 miles from downtown Pittsburgh. The Parkway Theater is Pittsburgh's first independent movie theater with a full-service bar and a brewery on site. I mean, the location is fantastic. We offer independent films and documentaries, live music on the weekends, live comedy here every Friday. I think we have one of the best trivia nights here in Pittsburgh. We do a little bit of everything under this roof. We also donate the space to local filmmakers. We do a lot of private screenings, and we'd like to say that this is their house, because it gives them a chance to get their project to the audience. And I feel that we are the anchor of the community by bringing people from all over Pittsburgh to recognize really great independent films and documentaries, giving a place for the community to congregate and mingle, because that's what it's all about.
Thinking about the personality, the people who own them, the programming, like you said, Bex, like the movies reflect the stuff that they like, right? I've never seen anyone with an AMC keychain, but I know people who've gone to like the Music Box in Chicago to throw a little love the Chicago's way and have owned like a Music Box shirt, because that's what some of these theaters have. Like they have merch, they have whatever they can that they sell, a slightly overpriced shirt, but you're proud to wear it because I went and supported and patronized this theater. And if you get this shirt, then you probably get me a little bit too.
Yeah, we were just at Coolidge and they had some t-shirts, but I
have your size because they sold out.
Yeah, they didn't have my size because they sold out that night.
Crazy.
And I was bummed because I saw the t-shirts and I was like, absolutely, yes.
We walk over and I'm like, what the fuck is this? And there's like hundreds of people lined up to get into this midnight showing of Blue Velvet, because it's this community. Like they want to be there and they buy the fucking merch. It's wild.
So I live down the street from Coolidge Corner Theater, and I know that there are theaters across this country that probably are just as good and have just as strong a following, but of the places that I've been to, very few do it better than Coolidge. I mean, the way that they cater to that area and that crowd, like the experiences that I had there, got to meet Bruce Campbell there, got to high-five Tommy Wiseau to see a midnight screening of The Room there. They did a whole summer where it was the Crazy for Swayze. So every week in the summer was a different Patrick Swayze movie. Like they get it. I'll sing that place's praises all day long. I love that theater so much. So many great memories of seeing movies and events there.
So here's another thing, right? Like we talked about the personality. So like the Coolidge is this old hipster group hang vibe. Like you go in and like we didn't feel, even though we were really the oldest people in line, we didn't feel like the oldest people in line, but like they advertise on their website. Like they do such a good job. I went to their website and I was like, this is the easiest thing I've ever done to pick a midnight movie for us for a date night in the future. I was able to buy the tickets like 2 months in advance. So I was able to like pinpoint where we were going to go. They really understand how to market themselves.
This is, I think, part of the other P, which is programming. I think you get some places that lean into the technology, lean into promotion, social media, trying to get the people that they know will love to patronize their place. I think this is where it's so different than like a big run theater where they're kind of at the mercy of what the studios are making. So they've got to have that 4th of July movie, and they know that during Christmas, they're going to have kid-friendly movies, and they're going to be able to get kids in and sell so much popcorn. But again, they're at the mercy of what the studio is making or not making. And indie theaters have to do a little bit more programming. They have to be a bit more selective. You have to kind of listen to your audience and figure out what are they going to come watch? What are they not going to come watch? But you also have to throw them some curveballs. Maybe you've seen it. Maybe you're not aware of it. But this is like the staff recommends at the video store. Like, I trust that person, so I'm going to trust their picks. I think an indie theater owner, the volunteers that work there, the employees that work there, are kind of doing that similar programming, whether they're showing stuff like first run stuff, but also like the classics, the indies, the foreign films like you mentioned, Alan, like cult classics, like exploitation, theaters that I've been to that have done like horror marathons, but they've also done like themed double features. Programming is probably, I think, the biggest key of them all because it's what keeps these places alive.
Definitely. There's a couple places, and Coolidge is one of them. It's funny. It's kind of like how you guys, set up your podcast. There are themes at different points based on like the time of year. Sometimes like around Halloween, you guys really focus on the horror stuff. A lot of these theaters do that.
Broad strokes here. I do think that people that kind of frequent indie theaters might have a little bit more patience, purposely not doing all the P's on purpose, literally. People are maybe more patient for a foreign film, for subtitles, for something they're not familiar with, as much as they're passionate. Seriously, I'm not doing the P's on purpose. They would go watch Back to the Future for sure because they've watched it 100 times, but they want to watch it 101 times, but now with a theater full of people that can quote it. I think there's also, again, broad strokes, a higher level of patience for people that might say, I've never seen this before, but I'm willing to give it a shot.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, again, as we've talked about with people who go to indie theaters, these are people who love movies. And if you love movies, you're willing to give other things a chance. And you have probably seen a lot more movies than most people that you know. We just saw this past year, One Fine Morning, which was really, really good and unexpected. We went for our anniversary or something.
Right.
It was a beautiful movie. It was a French movie. And I am so happy I've seen these movies that I wouldn't have if I didn't have somewhere like Kendall Square Cinema.
I can recall, and I remember going to like the landmark E Street Cinema in Washington, D.C., another favorite of mine, because, they would show first run stuff. They would occasionally show something that maybe you get to see at the Regal down the street, in Chinatown in D.C., but there was also just a ton of great indie and foreign films that you would go there. Not, I feel like there's always people like us that will kind of run that gamut where sometimes there'll be a foreign film that just like piques our curiosity. We've got to see that. But then, you'll also catch me at a midnight showing of The Room or Troll 2 or, Best Worst Movie or something like that, because I appreciate that other, side of filmmaking. But I can distinctly remember sitting in the theater at E Street, and as the previews are coming on, seeing a preview for a film that I had not heard of before. I can't think of anything specific, but I know that it happened multiple times. That looks really interesting. Oh, that's going to be here in a couple of weeks. I'm going to make a mental note of that, and I'll be back in a few weeks to see that. That was one way that I discovered the programming. Now I, again, feel very privileged to be living in Durham, North Carolina, where we've got the Carolina Theater. That is another place that just curates the fuck out of their stuff, like Kaiju Quest, where they'll play Godzilla movies. They've got, retrospective on Hitchcock. So I got to see The Birds in the theater. They do retro rock. So like every weekend, there's like a double feature where, our stranger friend Brooke and I went to see Breakfast Club and The Naked Gun. They've got their finger on the pulse of what people in this town will come out to see.
Let's take a step back in time. Uptown Charlotte, the year 1927, right at the corner of 6th and Tryon, the Carolina Theater opened up. It was called a cathedral of entertainment, had seats for 1,800 people, and that theater was the very first air-conditioned building in Charlotte. It was built like a Spanish palace, ornately decorated. People really came from all over the Southeast to the Carolina Theater. And the first movie was a silent film called A Kiss in a Taxi. Back in those days, you had a world tour organ accompany the movie with great music. That's one of the few pictures available of that. Lots of live performances, including the Charlotte Symphony. They were there. Then they brought in the talkies. One of those was Gone with the Wind in 1939. During World War II, movies like 30 Seconds Over Tokyo. The year 1956, on stage at the Carolina Theater, the one and only Elvis Presley in one of his first major performances in the Southeast. The Sound of Music set records as far as attendance. That was 1965. But unfortunately, 1978, November, Bruce Lee's Fist of Fury was the last movie to play there. And it sat silent for so many years. In fact, they made a little park right there at the corner of 6th and Tryon. But things are changing, and changing dramatically. The Carolina Theater will be back through the efforts of the Foundation for the Carolinas. Emily McAllister is the Programming and Operations Project Manager.
In keeping with the tradition of the theater's original purpose, which was for vaudeville and silent films, we'll bring back a ton of film to the area. Think like repertory and independent and documentary films.
There's a documentary series that I saw that I'm definitely going to try to check out now. It's called The Rep. Have you guys heard of this at all?
Mm-mm.
No? It's by Morgan Spurlock, and it looks like it came out around 2012, and it was a web series. And it was about a group of folks that were trying to reopen a small indie art house theater. Kevin Smith, John Waters, they've got all of these people that talk about their love and their passion or indie cinema. They're the people you talked about, Allan. They're the cinephiles that love cinema, especially in a small art house theater.
Well, a repertory cinema is a movie house that just shows classic films, pure and simple.
It's the fun movie theater that's not like cramming the popcorn and the big buy down your throat. It's like, hey man, come back and have a good time at the movies.
That was where you went to see the classics, the cult classics, the good films.
A movie house is like a club that's like you feel like it's your place when you go. It was a great place to pick up people because it was other film fanatics went there. It was a dating service, really.
There's a personality behind them, and a definite personality run by, a person or a group of people that have, really dedicated themselves.
A cinema that really cares about bringing back movies that people love, but also has a sort of forward-thinking idea about what a movie theater can be within a community.
It's the thrill of seeing all these movies with an audience.
There is nothing like seeing it on the big screen. Once you're together with a bunch of different people watching a film, you're seeing it in a different way. Seeing the movie through the eyes of everyone else in the room, and you're all looking at it together. And it's a really special experience.
You go, you come out rejuvenated. You never see anyone walking out of a rep house going, that sucked. You know why? Because they know exactly what they're going in there for. They've seen the movie probably a zillion times. And there's no such thing as suck. It's only going to heighten the experience.
Our cinema exists, and a lot of other cinemas like us exist, to preserve the idea that there is magic in cinema. That magic comes from an exhibition environment. That experience is so layered and rich, and you can't recreate that at home. You really can. There's no way. Watching a movie is not an activity. It's an experience. It's something you experience. The very fact that so few are left in this world, what happens to cinema? They hold a really important place in the history of cinema. And letting them die out would be letting part of cinema die.
It's crucial that we keep repertory houses alive.
Their whole idea here is essentially valorizing and reprogramming cinema. They are, in a way, representing and bringing back the art in the way that it was meant to be seen.
It's kind of hard to define in a sense, I think. I think it's anything out of the norm. I hope it's anything out of the norm because the norm is so boring. Ultimately, I think it's whatever you make it. Basically, it's a screen and some seats and a sense of community.
So it's a place to go see old movies and to see them like they were new movies and to enjoy them not as something from the past, but as something very new and vital.
And I just remember a line from Kevin Smith because I wanted to attribute it to him. And he's like, you never see someone walking out of an art house theater being like, oh, that sucked. Like, I've never seen that in a parking lot. It's always been like, oh, that was interesting or that was amazing. Maybe not what I expected. I've seen and been a part of those crowds of people coming out of an ANC that's like, that sucked. That was not what I wanted, versus the indie theater where you're like, yeah, all right, maybe that wasn't what I expected. It's all right. I'll be here next month. Something that you mentioned, Pete, that I wanted to go back to is you saw Bruce Campbell at one of these theaters.
At the Coolidge, yep.
They can bring in actors. They can bring in people like Bruce Campbell. I had Svengoolie sign a picture for me at the patio theater in Chicago, and I don't ever see that happening at a bigger, at an AMC or a Regal type multiplex. You don't see Bruce Campbell at those places. You see him at the indie theaters.
I want to say there's a difference between going to your AMCs, your Regals, to a sold out show there, and then going to see Bruce Campbell do a Q&A for his book, Make Love the Bruce Campbell Way, which is okay, but not as good as his first. But then he screened a movie he did with Ted Raimi, The Man with Two Brains.
A sci-fi original film, yeah.
Yeah, which wasn't awesome, but like everyone was there to see Bruce Campbell. And if anyone has ever been to the Coolidge, it's a pretty big theater. I mean, it's like a lot of those theaters where they retrofit. They've got some screens upstairs in smaller rooms, but the main theater is pretty big. And you've got a theater full of Bruce Campbell fans, just like rowdy, rambunctious. It's everything you could ask for. I still remember him getting up on stage. I was going to read from my new book, Make Love the Bruce Campbell Way. He's like, but I know you screwheads just want to ask about Evil Dead 4. And so this was like 2005 before, Ash vs. Evil Dead and, and everything that's come after that. So at this point, we were in that, that fallow period, after Army of Darkness, where people kept praying that there would be another Evil Dead movie made. And so to his credit, he did, I don't know how long it was, an hour and a half Q&A of people just getting up to the microphone, just, nonstop laughs. I mean, that man knows how to work a crowd. So it was a great time. And then they screened the movie after. So to have a theater packed with that type of fan base, as opposed to going to see the latest MCU showing where, yes, it might be sold out, and yes, it might be a good time, and you might get a great crowd response. There's just something different about going to an indie cinema for an event like that. Like it just seems to be an added emphasis on everyone is there with like this single-minded purpose, and you're all kind of, for that amount of time that you're all in that room together, it's definitely more of a cohesive community feel, I think, than going to see, the latest offering from Hollywood.
This is something that the indie cinemas can offer. It is more like the Coolidges, and like we saw Princess Bride with this group of Princess Bride rabid fanatics, and everyone's finishing the lines in the movie. And
Greenland, an entire theater of people just yelling out, "Inconceivable!"
Right? Yeah. Amazing. Carrie always comes out, and just like Bruce Campbell, like this is a master of ceremonies. This is a person who has been on stage their whole life. People don't know this, I guess, about Carrie always, but he does voices, he does impersonations, and he's excellent. And he does everybody in the Princess Bride cast to a T. And so he'll retell stories at a Princess Bride talkback about like Andre the Giant, and he does Andre the Giant's voice, and he does Mandy Patinkin's voice, and he does Christopher Sarandon really well. If I'm wrong, and I'm never wrong. And that's like the night that at like your local strip club, like the porn star shows up to dance.
It's inconceivable. 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 Inconceivable! I don't think it is what you think it is.
We've gone to Alamo Draft House. Alan Bex, you guys said you went to your first Alamo Draft House not that long ago. And I think beyond the movie, it's also the stuff that happens before the movie. At Full Moon Cinema outside of Nashville, watching Evil Dead 2, Friday the 13th. They just had episodes of The Munsters on. And I've been to see movies there before, and they had Twilight Zone episodes an hour before the movie started at the Alamo Draft House, where we saw Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, Pete.
Insert cool movie.
Other movie here, yes. What was cool was the stuff they aired before it, where they were playing scenes from what were very obvious, like Ghostbuster ripoffs from seemingly like Japan and China. And they were low budget and crazy and amazing.
They were doing like Ghostbusters, like 80s, like toy commercials and absolutely cooler commercials. Like it was very much catered to movie that you were about to see.
Yeah, I just think like someone made that choice. Someone like put that playlist together. Someone programmed it, and they knew that we would be in there being like, what is this craziness? And then also dig into that nostalgia of seeing like the Ecto Cooler commercial and be like, I remember having my mom buy me a ton of that shit, and it was great. It was amazing.
Fantastic. We've got a couple places that do trivia, and then they do like a lot of old school concessions.
The like all go to the movies.
Yeah.
Let's all go to the lobby.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
That's the best.
It's fun.
All right. That's the end of part 1 of our conversation. So make sure to tune into part 2, where Pete, Allan, Rebecca, and I continue our conversation about independent movie theaters. We'll explore the amenities, the unique amenities that really sets apart indie cinemas from the big cineplexes. We'll talk about the passionate people that are behind the scenes, the owners, the volunteers, their unique personalities, and how they kind of shape the indie theater going experience for moviegoers like us. And we'll talk about some of the unforgettable indie theater gems that we visited across the United States. As always, thanks for listening. Till next time.
Yeah.